So let's get started on self-love. That's what we're here for today. So there is so much advice out there. Whenever I'm in groups or just browsing the internet and I'm reading about toxic relationships and recovery and abuse, I'm always hearing people say, well, you just have to love yourself. You have to love yourself. And a lot of times people are just giving that advice and it's well-intentioned, but nobody's really talking, at least very often, about how to actually do that. How do you actually love yourself after a toxic relationship? So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. This is what I call my self-love formula. It's 3 key aspects for loving yourself after a toxic relationship so that you can recover from it much, much faster. So, step number 1 in my self-love formula is boundaries. Boundaries. I did a training last week on boundaries. It was called Boundaries 101. But boundaries is one of the key aspects for self-love. What does this look like when you're coming out of a toxic relationship? What I actually mean specifically is to stop contact with your ex. I know that when I say this, sometimes this can seem really overwhelming. And a lot of the talk that happens in relationship groups or people that are going through breakups, a lot of the talk when people are going through a breakup is that the mature thing to do is to stay in touch with an ex, to be friends with an ex. People say it's a sign of maturity to be able to still stay in touch with your ex, to still be able to have this friendship. I say, okay, we can say that, yes, if you had a healthy relationship, if this person treated you well and you just grew apart or you decided that you wanted different things, sure, we can make the argument that staying in touch with an ex could be a good thing. But when it comes to a toxic relationship, this is absolutely not the case at all. And I apologize if you hear sirens. There's a fire truck going by. Sorry about that. But anyway, so if you have had a toxic relationship, it is not the mature thing to do to stay in touch with an ex. So I actually recommend people to block their ex. I believe that this is what's necessary in order to truly heal and in order to truly love ourselves. We can tend to want to stay in touch with an ex because there could be a whole number of things going on. And I went through a lot of these as I went through different breakups in my life. We can sometimes tend to feel bad. We can feel bad for our ex because maybe they look like they're struggling without us. We can also tend to feel, somewhat guilty because we do see that maybe they're having a hard time. Maybe it looks like they're in pain, or you're, excuse me guys, or you're hearing from other people that they're not doing well. So there could be a number of reasons why we want to stay in touch with them. Or we ourselves don't want to go through that withdrawal process that coming out of a toxic relationship actually entails. It's not easy. Sometimes there's trauma bonds. It's a difficult process to detox from an ex, right? So there could be a number of things that are pulling us towards keeping in touch with our ex after a breakup. But, big but here. Staying in touch with someone who hurt you, who didn't appreciate you, who mistreated you, who abused you, is the opposite of self-love. It's actually self-betrayal. And this is why I speak so strongly on getting out of any communication with an ex when the relationship was toxic or abusive. It's actually hurtful to you to continue to stay in touch with an ex when the relationship was toxic or abusive. So this is the first one, and this is so important here. If you aren't able to have these boundaries after a relationship like this, it's going to be very difficult to move forward, to heal, to really love yourself. I'm curious what your experience has been. Please let me know in the comments. Have you tried to stay in touch with an ex, and how did it go? I can share a little bit about my experience here. So I did try to stay in touch with some of my exes in the beginning. This was before I really knew what I was doing. And it just made it so much harder for me to recover, because it was like every time I got a message from them, all of the emotions from the relationship would come back up again. And it would be like I had gotten to a certain point of healing, and hearing from them, it just put me back. Now, it doesn't mean that I wasn't actually getting better, but it was really hard to move forward. So yeah, Gina's saying, I always feel bad the whole convo. Exactly. So you know, this was the case for me too. I would be talking to them and just feeling terrible. And it got to a point where I was like, what am I doing here? Why am I putting myself through this? This actually feels bad every single time I'm talking to this person. And I did a training a while ago. I might do it again on how to let go of guilt after a breakup. Because a lot of what kept me in contact with them was guilt. Like, I felt bad for completely disconnecting from them. And that's a whole other topic here. But yeah, it's really important to notice how we're actually feeling when we're having these conversations. And if we're feeling bad, like Gina was talking about here, that's a very clear sign that it's not very loving to ourselves to continue to talk to someone. So, that being said, if just the idea of going no contact with someone who was abusive to you or toxic in the relationship, if that brings up a lot of fear or like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do that, please reach out for help. This is actually what I specialize in. You don't have to do this immediately if it feels too scary to do this. You can do it in baby steps. But one of the things that I specialize in is helping you release the energies that are making it so much harder to disconnect from someone. Usually there's a ton of things going on. I mentioned trauma bonding, but there's also sometimes just a lot of energies, and that's what I can help you release. So if this is going on for you, please reach out. You can break away from someone. It doesn't have to be so hard, and it doesn't have to take so long. Okay, so that was part one. Part one is boundaries. Part two of the self-love formula for how to love yourself after a toxic relationship is to take good care of yourself. This one is kind of like the duh one, like the obvious one, but I'm going to tell you something that isn't obvious here as to why taking good care of yourself is so important. So in my program, one of the things that I recommend for my clients to do is to really focus in on creating healthy habits for themselves, eating well, exercising, doing lots of self-care. Because, this is so important, because when you do that, when you're making sure that the priority in your life is to take care of yourself, that creates this new baseline of your experience of the world. And your new baseline is, I take care of myself. I treat myself well. So therefore, when someone comes into your world who is not treating you well, who is not taking good care of you, it doesn't feel like a match anymore. It's like, ooh, this doesn't feel good. I take good care of myself. I want someone who does the same. So this is really crucial here. And when we're recovering from a toxic relationship, this is no joke here. It takes a lot of physical energy to do this. We're processing a lot of emotions. It can be extremely tiring. So things like eating well and getting exercise and taking good care of yourself, that's hugely important for recovering from a toxic relationship. It helps you get better so much faster. So making sure you have a good sleeping routine, doing things that you love, these are all parts of the self-care, of taking care of yourself. Something that was really helpful for me, what I decided to do, this was like my big self-care thing. I did a lot of these things. Like I made sure I slept well, I stayed hydrated, I tried to eat as well as I could. I made sure I exercised a little bit, as much as I possibly could. But one of the things I started doing was wearing makeup. This was actually new for me. I had never been really big on makeup until more recently. And this is not to say that wearing makeup equals self-love. Absolutely not. The point here is to find things that feel good for you to do authentically. So yeah, I had not been into wearing makeup for a long time, and I realized that it was actually something I really enjoyed doing. It tapped into this creative side of me that I hadn't been accessing for a long time. It was within me. I really liked to be creative and artistic, but I hadn't been doing it. And I just found myself having so much fun experimenting with makeup and trying different techniques and different colors. And it really helped me come back to life. It felt like in doing these little acts of putting on some colors on my face, I felt like I was really taking good care of myself. And it surprised me because I was never really into that before. But this was something I discovered along my healing journey. And I still like to do it today. I don't do it every single day, but it makes me feel good to do that for myself once in a while. So again, this is not to say that wearing makeup equals self-love. It's whatever feels authentic to you. For some people, self-love might be, I'm not wearing makeup. I'm not doing any of that stuff. It doesn't feel good for me to do it anymore. That's the kind of energy we're looking for. What actually feels good for us to do to help us take care of ourselves, and then going and doing it. So yeah, I want to just go through your comments here before I move on. Let's see. I see Jessalyn. Hello. Who else is here? Hi, Tony. Okay, Cassie is saying here. Hi, Cassie. My abusive ex claimed he and the ex before me stayed friends. Oh, gosh. And agreed they wanted to stay in each other's lives. He claimed it's what mature adults do. Yeah. When I talked to her months after we split up, she had a very different story. Oh, this is so interesting, Cassie. She had no interest in keeping him in her life. I have only stayed in touch with one ex, and it took us over a year to actually get to the place of being able to be friends. That relationship was not toxic or abusive. Cassie, I really appreciate you sharing this. Thank you so much. Yeah, I see this all the time, and sometimes it drives me crazy. Because people make these blanket statements like it's the mature thing to do to stay in touch with an ex. And that is not the case. Every relationship is so different, and the circumstances are so different. And yeah, it drives me crazy when people say things like that. It is not the mature thing to do to stay in touch with an ex when the relationship was toxic and hurtful to you. So yeah, thank you for saying that. And that is very interesting that that's what your abusive ex said, and actually turned out to be a lie. Thank you for sharing that, Cassie. Yeah, and Cassie's saying, yeah, I had no desire to stay friends with either of my toxic exes. My ex-husband mentioned that maybe we can be friends one day. Yeah, Cassie, yeah. I know a lot of people who have had exes that really weren't able to show up in the relationship, but do want to be friends. It's quite interesting. Yeah, I don't blame you for that. Okay, Mia's asking, touch on the difference between self-care and self-love. Yes, Mia, I will go into that. And actually, I can do that right now. So self-care, it's not that it's different than self-love. It's just a small part of self-love. That's why I've included it in my self-love formula. It's a step. It's one of the aspects that is important to self-love, but it's not the entirety of self-love. So really, that's the distinction here. Self-care can be a wonderful way to start to love yourself, but it's not all of it. So I hope that is clear here. Yay, Gina's saying, yay, makeup. Yeah, makeup can be so fun if you're into it, if that's your thing. Oh, you're a makeup artist. That's so cool. When I do someone's makeup, their entire personality changes. Their confidence increased tenfold. It's the best feeling. Yeah, Gina, I think that's what it did for me too. It actually did make me feel more confident in myself. And I say that. And I also don't want to put it out there like makeup is what you have to do. But yeah, it was very helpful for me. So thank you for sharing that. My current boyfriend would not like me talking to my ex. Yeah, that's the thing too. Yeah, there's, and actually this is something I could talk about in future trainings. What is the right and healthy thing to do when it comes to exes? Because there's no blanket statement here. Like this is the only right thing to do. It very much depends on the circumstances. So that's a good point there. Thank you. Let me get some water here. And let me go into the third and the most important part of the self-love formula. So remember, just to rewind, the first part is boundaries, which means stopping contact with your ex. The second part is taking care of yourself, self-care, doing really good things for you so that you level up your baseline for what you expect in your world. And the third part, I've talked about this before, to let yourself feel whatever you feel. This is self-love at its core. So the reason that, well, let me back up. Let me talk about allowing ourselves to feel what we feel a little bit more specifically. So if we're coming out of a toxic relationship or an abusive relationship, we can get all these messages that we're supposed to feel happy. We're supposed to feel better because we've left. We're supposed to feel free, whatever it is, whatever the messages are that we're getting. And very often that's not how we actually feel. Very often we can feel guilty, like I talked about earlier. We can feel sad. We can feel lonely. We can feel scared sometimes, anxious. So there is no should when it comes to feelings. If anyone's ever telling you how you should feel, please throw that advice away. That is never self-loving advice. Self-love means you feel whatever you feel and you allow that to be okay. Because when we get to the origin of why we actually stopped loving ourselves, this is in childhood. There's many things that are going on here, but one of the key aspects of what happened is when we're children, when we're babies, we let ourselves feel what we feel. We don't care. We cry when we're hungry, when we're tired, when we're upset. We do what we want to do, right? But then we get to a certain age and people start telling us that we shouldn't feel how we feel. Maybe they tell us, oh, don't cry, you shouldn't cry. Or, men get a lot of those messages, especially, like boys don't cry. Or sometimes a lot of the messages that women get is, oh, girls can't be angry. Good girls don't do that. And so we become divorced from ourselves, from who we actually are, from these very energies that are completely authentic and want to come forth from within us and flow out of us. We shut them down. They become suppressed. And that's when we become divorced from ourselves. That's when we lose our capacity to accept and love ourselves, when we reject all of these aspects of ourselves. I'm curious if you guys have had this experience. I'm sure you have, because most people have. If when you were growing up, you got some of these messages that it wasn't okay to feel certain feelings or to explore certain aspects of yourself when you were younger because of the conditioning you received to stay in this box of what you were supposed to be. So when we're talking about self-love, it's actually a very spiritual process. It's an awakening process of allowing ourselves to feel these parts of us that we didn't let ourselves feel. So this act, if you take nothing away from this broadcast today, from this training about self-love, just remember this. Authentic self-love, the heart of it, the core of it, is allowing yourself to feel whatever you feel. There are so many ways to do this. Some people do inner child meditations. I have a lot of modalities that I use in my program to help us get in touch with these aspects of ourselves. But this is the heart of it. This is what it is. So if you're coming out of a toxic relationship and you're feeling angry and you're actually feeling maybe a little bit worse in the beginning, that's okay. That's normal. It's normal to feel a full range of emotions. Don't ever try to push that away or suppress that, because what that ends up happening is you might think that it's actually going to help you to recover faster, to not feel some of that stuff, but it's going to keep you stuck. What will actually help you to feel better faster and to truly love yourself and become more whole is to just let yourself feel what you're feeling. If you're feeling bitter, feel bitter for a while. If you're feeling angry, feel that for a while. If you need to just cry for a while, do that. Then you're going to feel better faster because those energies are just going to flow through you. So yeah, Maya is saying definitely got that message as when you were younger. Yeah, I think so many of us did. So every single time that you allow yourself to feel how you truly feel, that is an act of profound self-love. And it's something that I don't see many people talking about when it comes to self-love and recovery from toxic relationships. This is actually something that I had to learn in my spiritual awakening process. And it 100% applies to recovering from a toxic relationship. In order to heal, we have to feel. And you can imagine these parts of yourselves as little children. They just want to come home to you. And the more you feel them, the more they come home to you, and you actually become more whole. And that's what self-love is. Self-love is accepting all of these parts of you to become whole within yourself. So yeah, Gina's saying 100% just got guilted when I assert myself even to this day. Gina, I'm curious, what do you mean exactly by that? Like if you're enforcing boundaries, people are giving you a guilt trip. Is that what you mean? I'd love to hear more about that. So yeah, like I mentioned, a lot of the times we come out of a toxic relationship and we feel like we should feel happy. We feel like we should feel free. If you're feeling like you're getting stuck in a lot of these emotions, like if you're feeling like you have been feeling bitter for a really long time and it's not moving, it could be that this stuff is just getting stuck and you need some support. Please reach out to me if this is what you're experiencing. Again, this is one of the things I specialize in. I talked about it earlier. I can help you to release those emotions so that they can flow more freely and you can start to feel better faster. I saw this quote the other day that was just genius. It was from, I wrote it down here. It was from Peter Levine, and he was talking about trauma. So Peter Levine he's a well-known trauma therapist. He is the developer of somatic experiencing, which is a method for trauma therapy. And he said, this is what his quote was, and I loved it. It's not the traumatic event in itself that causes the triggers. It's the frozen residue of energy that has not been discharged. So that's what I'm really talking about here. When it comes to self-love and just healing in general, we have to feel, we have to release these energies. And that's how we can get authentically better and heal. So again, if you feel like this is kind of getting stuck for you, please reach out. I use modalities that make this very, very easy to process out these emotions so that you can feel better and love yourself. So let me see here. Oh, your parents. Okay. Yeah, and that, Gina, I would recommend going back and watching my Boundaries 101 training. It's from last week. I can actually tag you in it when we're done here. But yeah, I talked about this in the training last week. Setting boundaries with family can be one of the most difficult things because those patterns are so deeply ingrained. The patterns of behaving of kind of like how the family does boundaries. And then when you go in there and start to change them, there can be a lot of resistance because it's like, well, no, this is the way we've been doing things. This is the way things have been for so long. And people get kind of uncomfortable when you start to shift the dynamics. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Guys, this is your time to drop some questions here. So let me go through and see what other comments there are. Okay, so Gina's saying they will say I'm having bad behavior. I'm really trying to distance myself. So yeah, Gina, I'm assuming that there's some unhealthy dynamics going on, and it's perfectly okay to distance yourself. You're not behaving badly. It sounds like you're doing what you need to do to take care of yourself. And yeah, people are going to respond how they're going to respond. And that's not on you. That's not your responsibility to take care of them emotionally as your parents. You can do the best that you can and make sure that your boundaries are kind and you're expressing them in a clear and kind way. But then how someone responds to that, that's on them. Maybe they need to get some outside support to help them work through some of this. So my heart goes out to you because it can be really tough to set boundaries with people, especially parents. Yeah, they push your guilt buttons. Yeah. If you have parents who are particularly good at guilt tripping, it can be so hard to set these boundaries. And when that's the case, I strongly recommend getting professional support, because it can be so hard to stand strong within yourself in your boundaries on your own. So yeah, if I do recommend getting support if that is the case. Very cult-like. Oh gosh, Gina, that sounds tough. No, you're not taking over. This is what this is for. I want you guys to comment and ask questions and participate so that I can support you as best as I can. You know, that being said, there is only so much that I can do on these live chats. So if you need some more support, you are always free to reach out to me. I have my 12-week program, and I actually have been starting to come up with some ideas for some different types of programs that might be helpful. So maybe if you don't feel like the 12-week program is something you can do right now, I'm coming up with some other options that you guys might like. So stay tuned for that. Let me make sure that there wasn't anything else that I wanted to discuss here. No. So in summary, my self-love formula, how to actually love yourself after a toxic relationship, is these 3 steps. Boundaries, which means stopping contact with your ex. Number 2, taking good care of yourself, self-care. And number 3, allowing yourself to feel how you feel. If you follow these 3 steps, you can say that you are truly loving yourself. This is what self-love is. It's those 3 aspects. And I'm curious, if you guys have some other things that you have found to be very self-loving for you, drop them in the comments. Even when this broadcast ends, if you think of something during the day, you can feel free to go back and comment, because I'd love to hear what's really helping for you and what you have found to be self-loving. This is what's worked for me. It's what works for the women that I work with. So I hope that this has been helpful to you. And I'm going to leave this up here and see if there are any other comments or questions. But if not, you guys are always free to let me know what types of things you want me to do future lives about. I'll periodically put up the poll so you guys can vote, but you're always free to message me about topics that you want to learn more about, or drop a comment here and I will see what I can do. Okay, I'm gonna just leave it up here a second. I'm like, my voice is not great today. I think when we're having crazy weather here, like I'm in North Carolina, and it was just really cold for like a week, and now all of a sudden today it's gonna be like 75 today. It's crazy, and I think that messes with my throat and my voice. All right, guys, I don't see any questions here, so thank you so much for watching. Thank you for participating, and I will be back next week. All right, guys, have a good week.